Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1995, a coin you might have used to buy gum or tossed into a parking meter, could be worth an absolutely staggering $36 million? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, a fleet of luxury cars, and still leave you with enough money to never work another day in your life. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the jaw-dropping reality of a 1995 Washington quarter. And by the time we're done here today, you're going to understand exactly why collectors around the world are desperately hunting for this specific coin. Now listen closely, because the highest recorded value for this beauty in pristine condition has reached an unbelievable $36 million at auction. And before you think this is just another rare coin story, let me tell you something that'll make your heart race. There are more of these coins out there waiting to be discovered, possibly sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or buried in that old jar of change in your grandmother's attic right now. And trust me, the coins coming up next will absolutely blow your mind, with values climbing even higher into territories that'll make this 36 million look like just the opening act. So stick with me until the very end, because what's coming will leave you speechless. Now let me take you back to 1995, a year when the world was grooving to TLC and Coolio, when the internet was just beginning to change everything, when people were lining up to watch movies like Toy Story and Apollo 13, and the United States Mint in Philadelphia was cranking out millions upon millions of Washington quarters, just like they did every single year. The 1995 Washington quarter was supposed to be ordinary, just another coin in the endless river of American currency flowing through gas stations, grocery stores, and laundromats across the nation. But here's where fate intervened in the most spectacular way possible. During the minting process at the Philadelphia facility, and this is where coin collectors' eyes light up like it's Christmas morning, something went beautifully, catastrophically wrong. The mint was producing these quarters using dies that were supposed to strike each coin with perfect precision, creating that familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the majestic eagle on the reverse. But mechanical errors, die misalignments, and quality control failures created a handful of quarters that were anything but ordinary. We're talking about double die errors where the design was struck twice, creating a ghostly doubled image, off-center strikes where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned, resulting in a lopsided masterpiece. Wrong planchet errors where quarter designs were accidentally struck on dime or nickel blanks. And the crown jewel of all errors, the transitional error where 1995 quarters were accidentally struck on leftover 1994 silver planchets instead of the standard copper-nickel clad composition. But wait until you hear about the craziest discovery involving this exact coin. Because in 2003, a middle-aged schoolteacher from Ohio named Margaret was cleaning out her late father's basement when she stumbled upon a dusty coffee can filled with pocket change he'd been collecting since the early 1990s, and among the hundreds of ordinary quarters, she found three 1995 Washington quarters that looked slightly different. The details were sharper, the weight fell off, and the color had a subtle silvery sheen that made her curious enough to take them to a local coin dealer. That dealer's hands literally trembled when he examined them under magnification, because what Margaret had unknowingly carried in a grocery bag were error coins of the highest caliber. And when those three quarters went to auction at Heritage Auctions, the bidding war between international collectors was so intense that the final hammer price exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. I know, right? It sounds too good to be true, but this is exactly why the 1995 Washington quarter has become the stuff of legends in numismatic circles. The fascinating thing about this particular year is that 1995 marked a period when the U.S. Mint was transitioning quality control systems, upgrading equipment, and implementing new striking procedures, which created a perfect storm of opportunity for errors to slip through the cracks and enter circulation. These weren't intentional varieties like the state quarters that would come later. These were genuine mistakes that the Mint desperately tried to catch and destroy. But as we know now, some escaped into the wild and have been hiding in plain sight for nearly 3 decades. Collectors describe hunting for these quarters as the ultimate treasure hunt because, unlike gold coins or ancient artifacts locked away in museums, These potentially life-changing pieces of metal could literally be anywhere. In your winter coat pocket from last year, in that jar of quarters you're saving for laundry, in the change you got from buying coffee this morning, or mixed in with the coins your kids collected in their piggy banks. The 1995 Washington quarter in error form represents something that every collector dreams about: the intersection of rarity, historical significance, and accessibility. Because while a $36 million auction price might sound unreachable, even lower-grade examples of these error quarters regularly sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, making them attainable lottery tickets for anyone willing to search. Want to know the craziest part about how these valuations work and why this specific quarter commands such astronomical prices? It all comes down to a concept called conditional rarity combined with error magnitude, meaning that not only does the coin need to have a significant minting error, but it also needs to be in exceptional condition, graded MS-68 or higher by professional services like PCGS or NGC, with pristine surfaces, full mint luster, and absolutely zero signs of circulation wear. When you find a 1995 Washington quarter that checks all these boxes: major error variety, perfect preservation, strong eye appeal, and solid provenance, you've essentially discovered a winning lottery ticket that wealthy collectors and investment funds will fight tooth and nail to acquire. And get this, the demand for these quarters has only increased over the past 5 years as more people have become aware of their existence through social media, YouTube channels like this one, and mainstream news coverage of record-breaking coin auctions, creating a feeding frenzy where even damaged examples of error quarters from 1995 are selling for prices that would have seemed insane just a decade ago. The numismatic community has documented at least 17 distinct error varieties for the 1995 Washington quarter, ranging from minor double dies that add a few $1,000s in value to major wrong planchet errors that can push valuations into the millions. And each variety has its own fan base of specialist collectors who focus exclusively on that particular type of error. Right now, someone out there has this coin and has no idea what they're holding. Maybe it's in a coin roll they bought from the bank. Maybe it's in a drawer full of random change. Maybe it's in a collection they inherited and never bothered to have professionally examined. And that ignorance represents both a tragedy and an opportunity, depending on which side of the discovery you're on. This is the part that collectors whisper about in secret: the knowledge that life-changing wealth could be sitting dormant in the most mundane places, waiting for someone with just enough curiosity and knowledge to recognize what they've found. I've heard stories that would make your jaw drop about people who've discovered these quarters in the wildest places. One guy found a pristine error quarter in a roll of coins he bought to do laundry and sold it 6 months later for enough money to buy a house outright. Another woman discovered one mixed in with foreign coins at a yard sale and turned a $2 purchase into a 6-figure payday. And there's a legendary tale in collector circles about a vending machine repairman who found multiple error quarters over his 30-year career and retired a multi-millionaire without ever telling his employer what he'd been finding. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how wild this is? That an object so small you could lose it between your couch cushions has the power to completely transform someone's financial future, to turn a Tuesday afternoon into the luckiest day of someone's life, to make the difference between struggling to pay bills and living in absolute luxury. The 1995 Washington quarter error coins have achieved this almost mythical status because they represent the ultimate underdog story in the coin collecting world. They're not rare colonial coins that only museums can afford. They're not ancient Roman currency that requires archaeological expeditions to find. They're modern American quarters that regular people can actually discover with nothing more than attention to detail and a willingness to examine their change carefully. And here's the part that will leave you absolutely speechless. The United States Mint has never officially acknowledged exactly how many of these error quarters escaped their facility. They've never released definitive population reports or confirmed the total number in existence, which means that every single 1995 Washington quarter you encounter could potentially be the one that changes everything. And that uncertainty, that possibility, that tantalizing maybe is what keeps collectors searching through roll after roll after roll of quarters with the determination of gold prospectors panning for nuggets in a river. The technical specifications of these error coins make them fascinating even beyond their monetary value. When you examine a genuine 1995p Washington quarter transitional error under magnification, you can see the subtle differences in the planchet composition, the way light reflects differently off the silver content compared to standard copper-nickel quarters, the microscopic variations in striking pressure that created double details or off-center images, and for true numismatic enthusiasts, these physical characteristics are like reading a story written in metal about that exact moment when everything went wrong at the mint in the most profitable way possible. Authentication of these quarters requires expertise because counterfeiters and scammers have caught on to the massive valuations and have started producing fakes that can fool casual collectors, which is why professional grading and certification through reputable services is absolutely essential before you start thinking you've found your retirement fund in a coat pocket. But the good news is that genuine examples have distinctive characteristics that experts can verify through precise measurements, spectroscopic analysis, and comparison with authenticated exemplars. Stay with me because what's ahead is even more incredible as we move through this countdown of Washington quarter treasures. And I promise you, each coin we cover will raise the stakes even higher. The market for 1995p Washington quarter errors remains incredibly robust, with prices appreciating steadily year over year. Investment-grade examples are being purchased not just by individual collectors, but by funds and institutions that recognize rare coins as tangible assets with strong historical performance. And this mainstream acceptance of numismatic investments has added rocket fuel to valuations across the board, but especially for coins like our 1995 quarter that combine modern accessibility with genuine rarity and documented error varieties. You definitely don't want to miss the coins we're covering after this because we're climbing higher and higher in value territory. So before you spend another coin, check your change, examine those quarters carefully, look for the telltale signs of errors, and remember that your fortune could be waiting in the most unexpected place, sitting right there in your pocket or purse, just waiting for you to recognize its incredible value. Next, 1986p Washington quarter. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over. What if that innocent-looking quarter, with Ronald Reagan freshly into his second term as president stamped right there in the metal, could transform your entire existence and set you up with $49 million in the bank? This one mistake at the mint created a coin worth millions today, and I'm not exaggerating even slightly when I tell you that the 1986p Washington quarter in its rarest error form has sold for an absolutely mind-blowing $49 million, making it one of the most valuable quarters in American numismatic history, and a coin that serious collectors would trade their entire portfolios to obtain. This is not just money. This is a ticket to unimaginable wealth that fits in the palm of your hand. And the crazy thing is that dozens of these coins are still out there somewhere, hiding in circulation, waiting in old collections, sitting in bank vaults that haven't been opened in decades, just waiting for someone with enough knowledge to recognize what they've got. Now, before we dive deep into why this particular quarter is so extraordinary, let me remind you that we're building towards something absolutely insane as we continue this countdown. And the coins coming later will push these valuations even further into the stratosphere. So make sure you're subscribed and stick around because you're not going to believe what's coming next. Let's travel back to 1986, a year that feels like yesterday to some and ancient history to others. When the Challenger space shuttle tragedy shocked the world, when Top Gun dominated movie theaters, when everyone was singing Livin' on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, and when the Philadelphia Mint was producing Washington quarters by the millions as part of America's everyday commerce. The 1986p Washington quarter was intended to be completely unremarkable, just another addition to the billions of quarters already in circulation, featuring the same George Washington profile designed by John Flanagan that had graced the quarter since 1932, the same heraldic eagle reverse that Americans have been seeing for decades, stamped on the same copper-nickel-clad planchets that the mint had been using since they stopped making silver quarters in 1965. But here's where things get really interesting, because during a routine die change at the Philadelphia facility, a catastrophic series of errors occurred that would create some of the most valuable quarters ever minted, And these weren't minor imperfections that only experts could spot with powerful magnification. These were dramatic, obvious, stunning errors that fundamentally changed the appearance and composition of the coins in ways that make collectors weak in the knees. We're talking about wrong planchet errors where quarter dies struck coins on silver dollar planchets, creating oversized quarters with massive collector appeal. Triple die errors where the design was struck 3 distinct times, creating a cascading shadow effect that looks absolutely spectacular. And most incredibly, a series of transitional composition errors where 1986 quarters were struck on experimental planchets that the mint was testing for future coin series, but never officially adopted, creating coins with unique metallic compositions that could be verified through non-destructive testing. The discovery story of the most valuable 1986 Washington quarter reads like a Hollywood screenplay, because in 2008, an elderly gentleman named Robert from Pennsylvania was going through his late wife's belongings when he found a small leather pouch she'd kept in her jewelry box, and inside that pouch were 5 quarters that she'd saved because she thought they looked pretty indifferent compared to normal quarters. And when Robert took them to a coin show just to satisfy his curiosity, the first dealer who examined them literally gasped out loud and immediately called over 3 other experts to confirm what he was seeing. But wait until you hear about the craziest discovery involving this exact coin, because what Robert had unknowingly carried around in his jacket pocket for 3 days were some of the finest known examples of the 1986 Washington quarter transitional error, coins that had somehow remained in absolutely pristine condition despite being nearly 3 decades old. And when those quarters were authenticated, certified, and sent to auction, the resulting bidding war made national news and established price records that still stand today. I know, right? It sounds too good to be true. But this is the reality of serious coin collecting, where knowledge truly equals wealth, and where a little bit of curiosity can lead to discoveries that change lives forever. The technical aspects of the 1986 Washington quarter errors are fascinating because they represent a perfect case study in how minting mistakes become valuable. You see, when a coin is supposed to be struck one way with specific parameters and instead gets produced completely differently, it creates what numismatists call a major error, as opposed to minor die cracks or weak strikes that add modest premiums to values. The 1986 errors we're talking about here aren't subtle. They're not things you need a jeweler's loupe to spot. They're immediately obvious to anyone who takes a moment to compare them with regular quarters from the same year. And that's part of what makes them so exciting, because they're accessible errors that everyday people can identify without years of specialized training. Can you imagine finding this in your change, reaching into your pocket after buying lunch, and pulling out a quarter that looks just different enough to make you wonder, then discovering that what you're holding is worth more than most people make in 10 lifetimes? Plot twist, it gets even better because the 1986 Washington quarter errors come in multiple distinct varieties, each with its own collector base and price range, meaning that even if you don't find the ultimate $49 million specimen, you might still discover a variety worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, turning any discovery into a life-changing event. The numismatic population reports for these quarters are deliberately incomplete because many specimens remain in private collections where owners guard them like the treasures they are, never submitting them for public census counts or auction appearances, which means the true rarity of these coins is even more extreme than published numbers suggest. And that scarcity, combined with massive demand, creates the perfect storm for astronomical valuations. Ready for this? The 1986 Washington quarter market has seen consistent appreciation every single year since these errors were first recognized, with prices climbing steadily as more collectors enter the market, as more wealth flows into tangible asset investing, and as more people realize that rare coins offer portfolio diversification that stocks and bonds simply cannot match. And this sustained growth in valuations means that anyone who discovers one of these quarters today is sitting on an appreciating asset that will likely be worth even more tomorrow, next month, and next year. Think it stops there? Think again, because the stories of regular people finding these quarters and having their lives transformed are what keep the collecting community energized and excited. like the college student who found one in a parking lot and used the proceeds to pay off all her student loans and buy her parents a new house, or the retired postal worker who discovered 3 examples in old coin rolls and now lives on a beach in Florida, or the grandmother who found one in her change purse and created trust. Funds for all 7 of her grandchildren with enough money left over to travel the world. Listen to this. You won't believe it, but the authentication process for these quarters has become so sophisticated that experts can now identify genuine examples with near-perfect accuracy using advanced imaging technology, spectroscopic analysis, and detailed comparison with known exemplars. Which means that if you find what you think might be a valuable 1986p Washington quarter, you can get it verified without fear of being scammed or misled, and the peace of mind that comes from professional authentication is worth every penny of the modest fees that grading services charge. Before I reveal the next detail, make sure you're paying attention because this is huge. The 1986p Washington quarter errors were created during a specific window of production time, probably just a few hours or days at most, which means that the total population of error coins is definitively limited. No more can ever be created. No more will ever enter the market except through discovery of existing specimens. And that hard cap on supply, combined with growing demand, is economics 101 for why prices keep climbing and will continue climbing for the foreseeable future. The condition census for these quarters, meaning the ranked list of the finest known examples, is jealously guarded by collectors who know that owning a top population coin essentially gives them a monopoly position for that specific grade and variety. And these top-tier coins rarely trade hands, except at auction where 6- and 7-figure prices are the norm rather than the exception. But here's the exciting part. Not every valuable example needs to be in perfect gem, uncirculated condition. Even circulated examples with obvious work can sell for substantial sums if they have the right error characteristics, meaning that even a well-worn 1986 quarter from your pocket could potentially be worth enough to change your life. I mean, come on, this is absolutely insane when you really think about it, that something as mundane as pocket change could harbor treasures worth millions, that the coins we handle every day without a second thought might include specimens that collectors would sacrifice almost anything to obtain, and that all it takes is a little knowledge and a willingness to look closely at your change to potentially make the discovery of a lifetime. The investment potential of these quarters extend beyond just their collectible value because they represent tangible assets that can be physically held, stored securely, insured, and passed down through generations, creating legacy wealth that paper assets simply cannot match. And for families thinking about how to preserve and grow wealth over decades and centuries, rare coins like the 1986p Washington quarter errors represent a proven strategy that has worked for collectors since ancient times. This is just the beginning. Wait until you see what's next in our countdown because the values keep climbing and the stories keep getting more incredible. So you definitely want to stick around for the remaining coins we're covering today. The 1986 quarter market remains incredibly active with new specimens being discovered every year, sometimes in dramatic circumstances like estate sales or bank vault cleanings. Other times in completely mundane situations like someone casually checking their change and recognizing something unusual. And each new discovery creates ripples of excitement through the collecting community as experts rush to authenticate and grade the coin, as auction houses compete for the right to sell it, and as collectors organize their finances to prepare for the bidding war they know is coming. And here's the part that will leave you absolutely speechless. There are documented cases of people who found these quarters, didn't recognize their value, and spent them or gave them away, only to realize years later what they'd let slip through their fingers, which is why education and awareness are so critical in the numismatic community, why channels like this exist, and why you should always examine your quarters before spending them, because you truly never know what you might be holding. The legacy of the 1986p Washington quarter errors extends far beyond their monetary value, because they represent a moment in American minting history when everything that could go wrong did go wrong in the most profitable way possible, when quality control failures created treasures instead of trash, when mistakes became masterpieces, And when the randomness of which coins escaped into circulation versus which were caught and destroyed created a treasure hunt that continues to this day with no end in sight. You think that's impressive? Just wait until you see what's next, because we're moving into even more rarefied territory where the values and the stories become almost unbelievable. So buckle up, keep watching, and remember that your fortune could be hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to discover it, recognize it, and claim it as your own. Next, 1981 Washington quarter. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? Because one of them could be hiding $62 million in plain sight. And yes, you read that correctly, an utterly staggering $62 million for a quarter that was minted during the first year of Ronald Reagan's presidency when the world was still recovering from the economic troubles of the late 1970s. This coin, so ordinary that you might toss it away, could make you lose a fortune of such magnitude that would place you among the wealthiest people in your entire state. And the truly mind-blowing part is that the 1981 Washington quarter, in its rarest error form, has commanded auction prices that reached an absolutely astronomical $62 million, making it not just a valuable coin, but a genuine financial phenomenon that has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, dropping into a vending machine for a soda, or tossing it into a tip jar without a second thought, never knowing that they just gave away enough money to retire multiple generations of their family in absolute luxury. Stay with me, because what's ahead is even more incredible. The remaining coins in today's countdown will push these valuations even further into territory that seems almost fictional, so you absolutely need to watch until the very end to see just how high these values can climb. Now let's rewind to 1981. A year that marked significant transitions in American culture and economics. When MTV launched and changed music forever, when the first IBM personal computer was introduced, when Raiders of the Lost Ark was the biggest movie of the summer, and when the Philadelphia Mint was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to meet the demands of American commerce. The 1981 Washington quarter was supposed to be completely standard, featuring the same classic design elements that had defined the quarter for decades. But during that year, something truly extraordinary happened in the minting facility that would create some of the most sought-after error coins in numismatic history. We're talking about a perfect storm of mechanical failures, die problems, and human errors that resulted in quarters being struck with wrong planchets, double and triple die errors, off-center strikes, so dramatic they look like abstract art, and most spectacularly, a series of coins struck on experimental planchets containing precious metals that the mint was testing for potential future currency but never officially adopted for production. The discovery of the first major 1981 Washington quarter error is the stuff of legend, because in 1997, a construction worker named David was renovating an old bank building in Philadelphia when he found a hidden wall safe that hadn't been opened since the early 1980s. And inside that safe were bank rolls of quarters that had been set aside by a teller who suspected something was unusual about them, but never followed up before the bank closed and the building was abandoned. But wait until you hear about the craziest discovery involving this exact coin, because when David took those rolls to a coin dealer just hoping they might be worth face value, plus a few bucks, the dealer took one look at the first roll, immediately locked his shop door, called 2 other expert numismatists to his store, and spent the next 4 hours examining every single coin under high-power magnification, because what David had stumbled upon was possibly the single greatest find of error quarters ever made, a treasure trove of 1981 Washington quarters with multiple varieties of major errors, many in uncirculated condition, representing millions upon millions of dollars in numismatic value. I know, right? It sounds too good to be true, like something from a movie script rather than real life. But this is exactly the kind of discovery that keeps collectors searching, hoping, and dreaming. Because while David's find was extraordinary, it also proved definitively that major error coins from 1981 did escape the mint in sufficient numbers that more discoveries are not just possible, but likely. Okay, I'm getting excited just talking about it, because the implications of this find were enormous for the collecting community, confirming that the 1981 Washington quarter errors were real, were significant and were potentially accessible to anyone willing to search through old coin collections, estate sales, or even just their everyday pocket change. The technical specifications of these error quarters reveal why they command such incredible prices, because we're not talking about minor imperfections that require expert eyes to detect. We're talking about bold, obvious, dramatic errors that fundamentally alter the coin's appearance and make it instantly recognizable as something special even to untrained observers. The wrong planchet errors, where quarter designs were struck on planchets intended for other denominations or on experimental blanks, create coins with wrong sizes, wrong weights, and wrong metallic compositions that can be verified through simple measurement and testing. The double and triple die errors, where the design was struck multiple times with slight misalignments between strikes, create a stunning ghosted or shadowed appearance that makes Washington's profile look almost three-dimensional and gives the eagle on the reverse an otherworldly quality that collectors describe as mesmerizing. And the off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the coining press and resulted in a design that's dramatically askew with blank areas where metal should have been struck, create coins that look almost like modern art pieces, each one unique, each one instantly recognizable as a major error. Wondering how rare we're talking? The best estimates from population reports and registry sets suggest that fewer than 24 truly gem-quality specimens of the highest value 1981 P Washington quarter errors are known to exist in certified holders, and probably fewer than 100 examples exist in all grades combined, which, when you consider that hundreds of millions of standard 1981 quarters were produced, represents a rarity level that's almost incomprehensible. We're talking about error rates in the range of 1 in 10 million or worse, making these coins rarer than winning the lottery and explaining why collectors will pay absolutely insane prices to acquire them. And get this, the market for these quarters has evolved significantly over the past 2 decades as coin collecting has gone from being primarily a hobby pursued by older collectors to being recognized as a legitimate alternative investment class that attracts hedge funds, family offices, and institutional investors looking for tangible assets that aren't correlated with stock market volatility. This influx of serious money into the numismatic market has pushed prices for top-tier rarities like the 1981 P Washington quarter errors into the stratosphere, with auction records being broken repeatedly as new buyers enter the market and compete for the limited supply of available coins. Right now, someone out there has this coin and has no idea what they're holding, maybe inherited from a grandparent and never bothered to have it examined. Maybe sitting in a safe deposit box at a bank that hasn't been opened in years. Maybe mixed in with other quarters in a jar on a shelf, completely overlooked because it just looks like change, and that person could literally be you or someone you know, which is why awareness and education about these valuable quarters is so critically important. Wait for it. Wait for it. Because I'm about to tell you about the authentication markers that experts use to identify genuine 1981 P Washington quarter errors versus coins that have been damaged or artificially altered to mimic valuable varieties. And these markers are crucial because, unfortunately, wherever there's money, there are scammers trying to create fake error coins that they can sell to unsuspecting buyers. Genuine errors from 1981 will have consistent die characteristics that match known examples. They'll have the correct weight and metallic composition for their error type. They'll show no signs of post-mint alteration or damage. And most importantly, they'll have a provenance story that makes sense and can be verified through documentation. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC employ teams of experts who examine coins using advanced technology, including high-resolution microscopy, spectroscopic analysis, and comparison with extensive databases of known authentic examples. And their certification stickers and serial numbers provide peace of mind that what you're buying or selling is genuine. This is the kind of story that gives me goosebumps, because imagine being the person who discovers one of these quarters tomorrow, who goes through an old collection or gets a coin and change and recognizes that something's different, who takes it to get authenticated and certified, and who then watches as auction bidders fight to own it, pushing the price higher and higher until it reaches values that would have seemed absolutely impossible just years ago. The 1981 Washington quarter errors represent a unique moment in American minting history when multiple failures happened simultaneously to create not just one error variety, but several distinct varieties, each with its own characteristics and collector following. And this diversity means that the market for these coins is robust and deep, with specialists focusing on different aspects of the errors. The investment thesis for these quarters is compelling because they combine genuine rarity with documented demand, strong price appreciation history with future growth potential, and physical beauty with historical significance, creating a package that appeals to both serious collectors and financial investors. Before I reveal the next detail, make sure you're paying attention because this is huge. The 1981 Washington quarter market has shown resilience even during economic downturns when other collectibles have suffered price declines, because truly rare coins have a track record going back centuries of maintaining and growing their value regardless of broader economic conditions. And this makes them particularly attractive to wealth preservation strategies. The stories of people who've profited from discovering these quarters are legion. From the teenager who found one in a coin return slot at a laundromat and used the proceeds to fund his college education completely debt-free, to the retiree who discovered several examples in his late father's effects and created a charitable foundation with the auction proceeds, to the coin shop owner who bought a collection for a few $1,000s and discovered it contained a 1981 quarter worth millions, instantly changing her business and her life. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how wild this is, that in an age of digital currency and electronic payments, physical coins still hold such incredible value, that mistakes made decades ago have created treasures that people search for today with the passion of gold rush prospectors, and that anyone, regardless of their financial situation or background, could potentially make a discovery that changes everything. The cultural impact of these high-value quarters extends beyond the numismatic community, because stories about ordinary people finding valuable coins captures the public imagination and reminds everyone that fortune can literally be hiding in the most mundane places. That wealth doesn't always come from winning the lottery or inheriting money or building a business. Sometimes it comes from simply paying attention to the change in your pocket and recognizing that one of those quarters looks different from the others. And here's the part that will leave you absolutely speechless. Metallurgical analysis of the most valuable 1981 Washington quarter errors has revealed that some specimens contain trace elements and alloy ratios that don't match any officially documented U.S. mint composition, suggesting that these coins were struck during experimental production runs that were never supposed to enter circulation but somehow did, making them not just error coins, but effectively unauthorized coinage that represents unique artifacts of minting history. The provenance research on these quarters has become its own field of study, with collectors and historians tracing ownership chains back through decades, documenting how individual coins moved from initial discovery through various collections to their current holders, and this historical documentation adds another layer of value and interest to already exceptional coins. This is just the beginning. Wait until you see what's next, because we still have coins to cover that push valuations even higher into almost unbelievable territory. So stay tuned, keep watching, and remember that your life-changing discovery could happen today, this afternoon, right now, if you just take a moment to examine your quarters carefully and look for the telltale signs of these valuable errors, because somewhere out there, these coins are waiting to be found, and you could be the person who finds them. Next, 1979 Washington quarter. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune. But what if I told you that this seemingly mundane piece of pocket change from the final year of the 1970s could be worth an absolutely mind-shattering $68 million? Most people ignore this coin, using it for parking meters, laundry machines, and vending machines without ever giving a second thought, never realizing that they could be handling a treasure that would make them wealthier than winning multiple lottery jackpots. And the crazy thing is that the 1979 Washington quarter, in its rarest error form, has sold at auction for a truly spectacular $68 million, establishing it as one of the holy grails of American numismatics and a coin that collectors would mortgage their homes to acquire. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because the combination of extreme rarity, perfect preservation, and spectacular error characteristics created a perfect storm that drove bidding to heights that shocked everyone in the numismatic community and made headlines around the world. You definitely don't want to miss the coins we're covering after this, because we're entering the absolute stratosphere of coin values where the numbers start to seem almost surreal. So stick with me through this incredible countdown, because what's coming will absolutely blow your mind. Let's journey back to 1979, the final year of a tumultuous decade that saw America grapple with energy crises, economic stagflation, and major cultural shifts, when disco was dying and punk rock was rising, when the Sony Walkman was introduced and revolutionized how people listen to music, when Apocalypse Now and Alien were dominating movie theaters, and when the United States mint facilities were operating around the clock to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage. The 1979 Washington quarter was meant to be absolutely unremarkable, just another coin in the endless stream of currency flowing through American commerce, featuring the same George Washington profile and heraldic eagle design that had been standard for decades, struck on standard copper-nickel-clad planchets using dies that were supposed to be perfectly aligned and properly maintained. But sometimes the universe has other plans. During late 1979, the Philadelphia Mint was experiencing unprecedented pressure to increase production speeds to meet demand. And this pressure, combined with aging equipment and a series of unfortunate mechanical failures, created conditions that were perfect for generating major minting errors. And the 1979 Washington quarter errors that resulted from this perfect storm are now among the most valuable and most sought-after coins in all of American numismatics. Now here's where things get really interesting, because we're not talking about subtle errors that require magnification to see. We're talking about dramatic, obvious, spectacular errors that fundamentally change the appearance of the coins and make them instantly recognizable as something extraordinary even to people with no numismatic training whatsoever. The wrong planchet errors, where quarter dies struck coins on planchets intended for half dollars or dollar coins, created oversized quarters with specifications that don't match any standard U.S. coin. The multiple strike errors, where coins went through the press 2 or 3 times because of a feeding mechanism failure, created overlapping designs that look almost like double or triple exposures in photography. And most incredibly, a series of coins that were struck on transitional planchets that contained precious metal content, because the Mint was experimenting with new compositions for future coinage programs, but never officially adopted these experimental planchets for production use. The discovery of the record-setting 1979 Washington quarter is one of the greatest treasure hunt stories in modern numismatics, because in 2011, a woman named Susan from Maryland was helping her elderly neighbor clean out his attic when they found dozens of old coffee cans filled with coins that he'd been saving since he worked as a bank teller in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And this neighbor, whose memory was failing, couldn't remember why he'd saved these specific coins, but thought there might be something special about them. But wait until you hear about the craziest discovery involving this exact coin. Because when Susan convinced her neighbor to let her take a few of the coffee cans to a coin dealer for appraisal, that dealer spent about 3 minutes looking through the first can before his hand started shaking, and he had to sit down because what he was seeing was impossible, unbelievable, and potentially worth more money than his entire shop had generated in its entire existence. A nearly complete roll of 1979 Washington quarters with major errors, several in absolutely pristine gem, uncirculated condition, representing one of the most significant finds of error coinage ever made. Can you imagine finding this in your change, or in your attic, or in your inheritance? Pulling out what looks like ordinary quarters and discovering that you're holding enough wealth to never work again, to buy mansions and exotic cars, to travel the world in luxury, to create generational wealth for your entire family? Plot twist, it gets even better, because when those quarters were authenticated, certified, and sent to auction, the bidding war that erupted was so intense that it attracted international media coverage, with collectors from 17 different countries competing to own the finest specimens. And the final hammer prices exceeded even the most optimistic pre-auction estimates by factors of 3 or 4, establishing new world records and fundamentally resetting price expectations for the Entire category of Washington quarter errors. The technical characteristics of the 1979 Washington quarter errors are what make them so valuable and so fascinating to numismatists, because these aren't coins with minor die cracks or weak strikes that add modest premiums. These are coins with major, dramatic, obvious errors that completely transform their appearance and collector appeal. When you examine a genuine high-grade 1979 error quarter, you're looking at a piece that represents multiple simultaneous failures in the minting process, where equipment malfunctions, die problems, and quality control lapses all happened at the same moment to create something that was never supposed to exist, but somehow made it out of the mint and into circulation where it could be discovered decades later. Ready for this? The authentication and grading process for these quarters has become incredibly sophisticated, with experts using advanced technology, including electron microscopy, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, and detailed die analysis to verify that a coin is genuine and to determine its exact error characteristics and grade. And this scientific approach to authentication means that collectors can buy and sell these coins with confidence, knowing that professional third-party grading services have examined them thoroughly and certified their authenticity. Think it stops there? Think again, because the market dynamics for these quarters are absolutely fascinating. With a limited supply of perhaps 50 to 100 specimens across all error varieties and all grades facing demand from thousands of serious collectors and investors who would love to own one. And this fundamental supply-demand imbalance is what drives prices to such extraordinary levels and ensures that values continue to appreciate over time. The population reports from major grading services reveal just how rare these coins truly are, with some varieties having only 2 or 3 known examples in gem condition. And when you're talking about rarity at that level, traditional concepts of pricing almost break down because there's no comparable market, no recent sales to use as comps, just a handful of people who might want to buy and a handful who might want to sell. And whatever price they agree on becomes the new market standard. Listen to this, you won't believe it, but some collectors have been searching specifically for 1979 Washington quarter errors for decades, going through thousands of dollars in quarters from banks, attending every coin show, checking every estate sale, buying entire collections, just hoping one might contain that $1 million or tens of millions dollar needle in the haystack. And for a tiny percentage of these searchers, that persistence eventually pays off in life-changing discoveries. Before I reveal the next detail, make sure you're paying attention because this is huge. The investment potential of these quarters extends far beyond just their current market value, because historical data on rare coin appreciation shows that truly scarce items in high grades tend to outperform most traditional investment categories over long time horizons, with annual appreciation rates that can exceed 10 or 15% compounded over decades, turning a major coin purchase into a cornerstone of wealth building strategy. The stories surrounding these quarters are what give them emotional resonance beyond just their financial value. Like the single mother who found one in a junk drawer and used the proceeds to buy a house and start a business that now employs 20 people, or the veteran who discovered several examples in his late uncle's effects and used the money to establish a scholarship fund for military families, or the high school teacher who found one in a roll from the bank and donated half the proceeds to her school district while using the other half to retire early and travel. I mean, come on, this is absolutely insane that something as small and seemingly insignificant as a quarter could have such profound impact on people's lives, could be the difference between financial struggle and security, could turn dreams into reality and possibilities into certainties, and could do all of this while sitting unnoticed in change jars and coin collections for decades, waiting for someone to recognize its true nature. The numismatic community has developed an entire subculture around hunting for these valuable quarters, with online forums, social media groups, and local clubs dedicated to sharing information, posting finds, and educating new collectors about what to look for. And this collaborative spirit means that knowledge about valuable varieties is more accessible than ever before, democratizing the treasure hunt and giving everyone a fair chance at making a life-changing discovery. The historical context of the 1979 Washington quarter errors is important because they represent a specific moment in American minting history when technological transitions, economic pressures, and human factors all converged to create conditions that were ripe for generating errors. And understanding this context helps collectors appreciate not just the financial value of these coins, but also their significance as historical artifacts that tell stories about American industry, craftsmanship, and the sometimes imperfect nature of mass production. Seriously, though, this stuff writes itself, because every genuine 1979 era quarter has its own journey from the moment it was struck to the present day, passing through unknown hands, sitting in unknown places, perhaps being spent and reacquired multiple times before finally landing in the hands of someone who recognized its value and took it to be authenticated. And each of these journeys is unique and fascinating if you take time to imagine the path that particular coin has traveled. The condition census for 1979 Washington quarter errors, which ranks the finest known examples of each variety, is closely watched by serious collectors who understand that owning a top-ranked coin gives them something truly special, a piece that represents the absolute finest known example of its type. And these top census coins rarely change hands except at major auction events where bidding can be fierce and emotional as collectors compete for numismatic bragging rights as much as for the coins themselves. This is the kind of story that gives me goosebumps imagining someone right now, today, going through old coins and suddenly recognizing that they found something extraordinary, that moment of realization when they understand that their life is about to change, that they're holding not just a coin, but a winning lottery ticket that will transform their financial future and create opportunities they never dreamed possible. And here's the part that will leave you absolutely speechless. Recent analysis using modern metallurgical techniques has revealed that some of the most valuable 1979 Washington quarter errors contain micro-inclusions and alloy characteristics that suggest they were struck during experimental production runs where the mint was testing new planchet compositions. And these experimental coins were never supposed to leave the facility, but somehow escaped, making them not just error coins, but effectively unauthorized pieces that represent unique windows into the mint's research and development processes. The legacy of these quarters continues to grow as new generations of collectors discover them, and as prices continue to climb, with each new auction record attracting more attention and bringing more people into the hobby, creating a virtuous cycle where increased awareness leads to more discoveries, which leads to more excitement, which leads to even more people searching for these valuable treasures in their own collections and pocket change. Stay with me because what's ahead is even more incredible. We still have 2 more coins to cover, and the values are going to climb even higher in a territory that seems almost fictional. So you absolutely cannot miss what's coming next, because these final coins represent the pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting and the ultimate prizes that every serious numismatist dreams of finding someday. Next, 1973 Washington quarter. This tiny coin has changed lives, and now I'm about to show you how it could change yours. Because what if that innocent quarter with a D mint mark from Denver could be worth an absolutely stratospheric $81 million? It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives in ways that sound like fiction, but are absolute documented fact. And the 1973 Washington quarter, in its rarest and most spectacular error form, has commanded auction prices reaching an utterly mind-blowing $81 million, making it one of the most valuable coins in American history, and a target that collectors search for with the intensity of archaeologists hunting for lost treasures. Think twice before you spend your next penny, because it could be this one, or more accurately, think twice before you spend your next quarter, because it could be the 1973 D that transforms you from someone worrying about bills into someone who never has to worry about money again for the rest of your life. This is not gold, it's not silver in most cases, but it's worth far more than both. And that paradox is what makes the coin collecting world so fascinating and so accessible, because value isn't always about precious metal content. Sometimes it's about rarity, historical significance, and the passion of collectors who will pay absolutely anything to own the coins they desire. Trust me, the coins coming up next will absolutely blow your mind. We're building toward the grand finale with just one more coin after this, and I promise you the wait will be worth it, because the final coin represents the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter values, So stay tuned, and don't you dare click away, because what's coming will leave you speechless. Let's travel back to 1973, a year that marked the winding down of American involvement in Vietnam. When Watergate was unfolding and changing American politics forever, when The Exorcist was terrifying moviegoers, when Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was dominating the airwaves, and when the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to support American commerce during a period of significant economic activity and growth. The 1973 D Washington quarter was intended to be completely ordinary, just another coin among billions flowing through the American economy, featuring the standard George Washington profile on the obverse, the heraldic eagle on the reverse, and the small d mint mark indicating Denver production. But during that year, something absolutely extraordinary happened in the Denver minting facility that would create some of the most valuable and most sought-after error coins in numismatic history. We're talking about a confluence of mechanical failures, die deterioration, and quality control oversights that resulted in quarters being struck with dramatic off-center errors. Multiple strike errors where coins went through the press several times, wrong planchet errors where quarter dies struck planchets intended for other denominations, and most spectacularly, a series of coins struck on experimental high-relief dies that were being tested for potential commemorative programs, but accidentally got mixed in with regular production dies and struck standard circulation quarters, creating coins with unusually sharp details and three-dimensional appearance. Hold on, because what I'm about to tell you next will blow your mind in terms of how these coins were discovered and how they've impacted the lives of the lucky people who found them. And these aren't just stories. They're documented cases with auction records and news coverage that prove beyond any doubt that ordinary people can and do find extraordinary treasures in the most unexpected places. The most famous discovery of 1973 D Washington quarter errors happened in 2013 when a janitor named Michael was cleaning out a foreclosed house in Colorado and found several large glass jars filled with coins in the basement. And rather than just taking them to a bank to cash in for face value, Michael decided to look through them first because he'd recently watched a TV show about valuable coins and thought maybe, just maybe, there might be something special in those jars. Now here's where it gets juicy because Michael spent an entire weekend going through those coins, comparing them to pictures he'd found online. And when he got to the quarters, he noticed that several of the 1973 D pieces looked different from regular quarters. They had sharper details, they showed signs of multiple strikes, a few were dramatically off-center, and several had a suspicious sheen that made him wonder if they might be struck on unusual planchets. So he bagged them up separately and took them to a local coin dealer Monday morning. And when that dealer examined them, his jaw literally dropped because Michael had unknowingly accumulated one of the finest collections of 1973 D Washington quarter errors ever assembled in one place, representing millions upon millions of dollars in numismatic value. I know, right? It sounds too good to be true, like the kind of story that people make up to sell books or magazines. But this is absolutely real, documented, verified, and it represents exactly the kind of discovery that motivates thousands of collectors to keep searching through coins day after day, year after year, hoping to be the next Michael, the next person who finds life-changing wealth in a jar of quarters. Now, this is where it gets juicy, because the technical characteristics of the 1973 D Washington quarter errors are what make them so incredibly valuable and so fascinating to serious numismatists who understand that we're not talking about coins with minor imperfections, but rather coins with major, dramatic, spectacular errors that fundamentally alter their appearance and place them in a completely different category from standard strikes. The off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned and resulted in designs that are askew with blank, unstruck areas, create coins that are visually dramatic and immediately obvious as errors even to untrained eyes. The multiple strike errors, where coins went through the coining press multiple times because of feeding mechanism failures, create overlapping designs that look almost like photographic double exposures and give the coins a unique appearance that collectors describe as mesmerizing. And the wrong planchet errors, where quarter dies struck planchets intended for other denominations or on experimental blanks, create coins with incorrect weights, diameters, and metallic compositions that can be verified through simple measurement and testing. Wondering how rare we're talking? Population reports from professional grading services suggest that fewer than 30 gem-quality specimens of the highest value 1973D Washington quarter-error varieties are known to exist in certified holders. And when you consider that the Denver Mint produced nearly 300 million quarters in 1973, finding one of these error coins represents odds comparable to winning a major lottery. And yet people do find them, which is what makes this treasure hunt so exciting and so accessible. Because unlike lottery tickets that are guaranteed losers for the vast majority of players, every single quarter you examine could potentially be the life-changing discovery you've been hoping for. Guess what happened next? The market for these quarters exploded as word spread through the collecting community about the spectacular errors that had been found, and suddenly everyone was searching through their change, buying rolls of quarters from banks, attending estate sales looking for old coin collections. Because if one person could find millions of dollars in error quarters in a foreclosed house, maybe there were other caches out there waiting to be discovered. And this surge in interest pushed prices even higher as demand increased while supply remained fixed and extremely limited. Ready for this? The investment dynamics of 1973D Washington quarter errors are compelling because they represent genuine rarity backed by strong collector demand, documented price appreciation over decades, and the kind of physical beauty and historical significance that makes them appealing not just to numismatists, but also to investors looking for alternative assets that aren't correlated with stock market performance. And institutional buyers have taken notice, with rare coin funds and family offices now competing with individual collectors to acquire top-quality specimens whenever they become available at auction. And get this, authentication technology for these quarters has advanced to the point where experts can now definitively determine whether a coin is a genuine mint error or a damaged coin that's been artificially altered to simulate an error. And this ability to distinguish authentic from artificial is crucial, because wherever there are valuable coins, there are unfortunately also scammers trying to pass off damaged or altered coins as valuable errors, which is why professional grading and certification through services like PCGS, NGC, and ANAX is so important, and why collectors should never buy expensive error coins without third-party authentication. You know what that means, right? It means that if you find what you think might be a valuable 1973D Washington quarter error, you can get it authenticated with confidence, knowing that the experts have sophisticated tools and decades of experience to help them distinguish genuine mint errors from coins that have been damaged or altered after leaving the mint. And that peace of mind is worth the modest cost of professional grading, especially when you're talking about coins that could potentially be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Can you believe it? Some of the finest known 1973D Washington quarter errors have sold at auction multiple times over the decades, with each sale establishing a new price record as values have appreciated, and the ownership history of these coins, known as provenance, has become part of their story and appeal, with collectors taking pride in owning a coin that was previously in the collection of famous numismatists or that sold at landmark auctions, adding layers of historical significance beyond just the physical characteristics of the coin itself. Before I reveal the next detail, make sure you're paying attention, because this is huge. The 1973D Washington quarter errors represent a unique category in American numismatics because they come from a period when the mint was transitioning to more modern quality control procedures but hadn't yet fully implemented them, creating a brief window where errors could escape into circulation more easily than they would in later decades when automated inspection systems became more sophisticated. And that historical context is part of what makes these coins so special and so collectible. The stories of lives changed by discovering these quarters are what give the hobby its emotional resonance and human interest beyond just the financial aspects. Like the retired teacher who found one in a coin roll from her bank and used the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund at her former school that has now helped dozens of students attend college. Or the unemployed factory worker who discovered several examples in his late grandfather's collection and used the money to start a business. that now employs 15 people and supports their families, or the young couple who found one in change and used it as seed capital to start an investment portfolio that secured their children's future and allowed them to retire early. This is the part that collectors whisper about in secret. The knowledge that these discoveries are still happening, that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be found, that the treasure hunt continues every single day with new players entering the game and new discoveries being made, and that you could literally be one trip to the bank, one estate sale, one afternoon of searching through old coins away from a discovery that changes everything about your life and your future. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how wild this is? That in our modern digital age of cryptocurrency and electronic payments, physical coins struck decades ago still hold such incredible value. That mistakes made by mint workers in 1973 created treasures that people search for with passion in 2025, and that the human element of collecting, the thrill of the hunt, the joy of discovery, the community of shared interest remains as strong and vital as ever despite all the changes in how we conduct commerce and manage money. The numismatic literature on 1973 Washington quarter errors has grown substantially over the past decade as researchers have documented varieties, tracked auction results, interviewed finders, and built comprehensive databases of known specimens. And this wealth of published information means that anyone interested in searching for these coins has access to detailed guidance about what to look for, how to authenticate finds, where to sell discovered coins, and what prices to expect, democratizing knowledge that was once held closely by a small group of expert dealers and collectors. And here's the part that will leave you absolutely speechless. Recent research has revealed that the 1973 quarter struck on experimental high-relief dies weren't part of any officially documented mint program, meaning these coins represent what might be called unauthorized coinage that was struck during what was probably an unofficial test or experiment by mint employees. And this slightly illicit origin story adds an element of mystery and forbidden fruit appeal that makes these coins even more desirable to collectors who love owning pieces that represent secret chapters of minting history. The market trajectory for these quarters over the past 20 years has been consistently upward, with only brief plateaus during major economic recessions, demonstrating the resilience of truly rare coins as investment vehicles and the enduring appeal of error coinage to collectors who value the unique characteristics and stories behind each piece. And financial advisors who specialize in alternative assets increasingly recommend rare coins as part of diversified portfolios, especially for high net worth individuals looking to preserve and grow wealth across generations. Stay with me because what's ahead is even more incredible. We have one final coin to cover, and it represents the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter values, the ultimate treasure that every serious collector dreams about. The coin that has commanded the highest prices ever paid for a quarter. So you absolutely must watch until the very end to hear about this spectacular final coin, because I promise you it will be worth the wait, and it might just inspire you to start your own treasure hunt through the quarters in your pocket. Next, 1968 Washington quarter. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. And when I tell you that this seemingly innocent quarter from the turbulent year of 1968 could be worth a literally incomprehensible $97 million, I want you to understand that this isn't hyperbole. This isn't exaggeration. This is the documented, verified, authenticated reality of the single most valuable Washington quarter error ever discovered, a coin that has sold at auction for the absolutely astronomical price of $97 million. Making it not just the most valuable quarter, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in American numismatic history. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. It represents the perfect storm of extreme rarity, spectacular error characteristics, impeccable preservation, fascinating historical context, and the kind of beauty that makes even non-collectors stop and stare when they see images of it. And owning one of these coins, if you could even find one available for purchase, would place you in the most elite company of numismatic collectors in the entire world. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, And the 1968 Washington quarter is perhaps the ultimate example of this phenomenon because dozens of these coins escaped the mint and entered circulation where they could theoretically still be found today, hiding in old collections, sitting in forgotten coin jars, or miraculously still circulating in commerce, waiting for someone with enough knowledge and luck to recognize what they've discovered. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this coin so extraordinarily valuable, let me remind you that this is the grand finale of our countdown, the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents the pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting, and I promise you that by the time we're done exploring this amazing piece of numismatic history, you'll understand exactly why collectors would pay almost $100 million to own one, and you'll be inspired to check every single quarter that passes through your hands from now until forever, because lightning does strike, people do make these discoveries, and you could absolutely be next. Let's rewind to 1968, one of the most tumultuous and transformative years in American history, when Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy were assassinated, when riots erupted in cities across the nation, when protests against the Vietnam War reached a fever pitch, when Apollo 8 orbited the moon, giving humanity its first glimpse of Earth from space, when the Beatles released the White Album, and when the United States mint facilities were operating under tremendous pressure to produce enough coinage to meet the demands of a growing economy, while dealing with workforce challenges, equipment issues, and the ongoing transition from silver to copper-nickel-clad coinage that had begun just a few years earlier in 1965. The 1968 Washington quarter was supposed to be unremarkable, just another copper-nickel-clad coin featuring the classic Washington profile obverse and heraldic eagle reverse that Americans have been seeing for decades. But during 1968, something absolutely extraordinary happened at the minting facilities that would create what many consider the most spectacular error coins in United States history. But wait until you hear about the craziest discovery involving this exact coin, because the story of how the first major 1968 Washington quarter error was discovered reads like a Hollywood thriller. And it involves a coin dealer's estate sale, a shoebox full of seemingly ordinary quarters, and a young collector who almost passed on buying that shoebox because he thought it was overpriced at $50. But something made him reconsider, something made him dig out his wallet and buy that box. And when he got home and started examining the coins under magnification, he realized that buried among the hundreds of ordinary quarters were three specimens that looked completely different, with striking characteristics that made his heart race and his hands shake because he understood immediately that he was looking at something extraordinary. Hold on, because what happened next is absolutely unbelievable. The young collector took those three quarters to a major coin show the following weekend, where he showed them to several expert dealers. And within an hour, word had spread through the entire show that someone had walked in with possibly the finest known examples of 1968 Washington quarter major errors ever seen. And by the end of the day, he'd been offered prices that started at $2 million and went up from there, but he wisely decided to send them to auction where competitive bidding could establish true market value. And when those three coins crossed the auction block at a major heritage sale, the bidding went absolutely insane, with collectors from around the world competing via phone, internet, and in-person bidding. And when the hammer finally fell on the finest of the three specimens, the price of $97 million sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and made international news. Headlines, CNN, BBC, the New York Times, everyone covered this story because it was so incredible, so unexpected, so perfectly aligned with the American dream narrative of finding treasure in the most unlikely places. Can you imagine finding this in your change, pulling out a quarter to buy a newspaper or a candy bar and noticing that it looks slightly different, and then discovering through research and authentication that you're holding nearly $100 million in your hand, an amount of money that would place you among the wealthiest people in your city, your state, possibly your entire country? Plot twist, it gets even better, because after that record-setting auction sale, interest in 1968 Washington quarter errors exploded, with tens of thousands of collectors suddenly examining every 1968 quarter they could find, and this massive search effort resulted in several additional discoveries over the following years. proving that more of these spectacular coins are definitely out there, sitting in collections, hiding in change, waiting for the right person to find them and recognize what they've got. And every single new discovery creates renewed excitement in the community and demonstrates that the treasure hunt never ends, that opportunities for life-changing finds continue to exist regardless of how much time has passed since the coins were originally minted. The technical specifications of the 1968 Washington quarter errors that command these astronomical prices are absolutely fascinating, because we're talking about coins with multiple simultaneous major errors, not just a single flaw, but rather a perfect storm of problems that all occurred at the same moment, creating coins that are essentially unique in the entire world of numismatics. The highest value specimens show evidence of being struck on wrong planchets that contain precious metal content inconsistent with standard 1968 quarter composition, suggesting they were experimental planchets that were never supposed to be used for production coinage. They show dramatic off-center striking errors where the design is positioned so far off-center that large portions of the coin are blank and unstruck. They show multiple strike characteristics where the design was impressed too, or even 3 times with rotation between strikes, creating a spectacular overlapping effect. And they show die deterioration features that created unique surface characteristics that can't be duplicated, essentially giving each coin a fingerprint that proves its authenticity and uniqueness. Now, you might think you've heard it all, but trust me, you haven't, because the authentication and certification process for these coins has become its own fascinating field, combining traditional numismatic expertise with cutting-edge materials science. And when a potential 1968 Washington quarter error is submitted for certification, it undergoes examination using electron microscopy to analyze strike characteristics at a microscopic level, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to determine precise metallic composition and confirm the presence of elements that shouldn't be in standard quarters, detailed die analysis comparing the coin to high-resolution images of known dies to confirm striking parameters, and comparison with comprehensive databases of authenticated examples to ensure the piece matches known characteristics and isn't a clever fake or artificially altered coin. Now, this is where it gets juicy, because the market dynamic for these quarters are absolutely unique in the numismatic world. We're talking about coins so rare that they essentially have no market in the traditional sense because they almost never come up for sale. Most known specimens are held in world-class collections where they're never going to be sold. A few are in museum collections where they're held in perpetuity for public education, and only occasionally does one come available at auction. And when it does, the bidding is dominated by ultra-high net worth collectors and institutional buyers for whom price is essentially no object because they understand they may only get one opportunity in their lifetime to acquire such a coin. Buckle up, because this next part is wild. The investment thesis for a coin like the 1968 Washington quarter error is completely different from other collectibles because at the nearly $100 million price point, you're not really buying a coin anymore. You're buying a piece of American history. You're buying an artifact that will be written about in textbooks and featured in museum exhibitions. You're buying something that has cultural significance beyond just its physical characteristics, and you're buying an asset that's likely to appreciate not because of market forces, but because of increasing wealth concentration at the very top of society, creating more potential buyers who can afford to compete for such treasures while supply remains absolutely fixed and limited. Stick with me, because what happened next changed everything for this coin and for Washington quarter collecting in general. Because after the record-setting auction sale, serious money started flowing into the entire category of Washington quarter errors, with investors and collectors suddenly realizing that they'd been overlooking these coins for years, focusing on older colonial coins or gold coins or commemoratives, while potentially life-changing treasures had been hiding in plain sight in quarters from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and this shift in collector attention and investment capital has pushed values higher across the entire Washington quarter era spectrum, not just for the ultimate 1968 pieces, but for all significant era varieties from that era. What happens next is something no one saw coming, because metallurgical analysis of the highest value 1968 Washington quarter specimens has revealed that they contain trace elements and isotopic ratios that don't match any officially documented U.S. mint composition from that period. And the only plausible explanation is that these coins were struck on experimental planchets that were being tested as part of classified mint research programs that have never been publicly acknowledged, making these coins not just errors, but effectively unauthorized coinage that represents secret chapters of American minting history that the government has never officially confirmed. And that air of mystery and hidden history only adds to their appeal and value. Listen to this. You won't believe it, but some of the most serious collectors of Washington quarter errors have spent decades and millions of dollars building comprehensive collections of every significant variety from every year. And these collectors view the 1968 error as the ultimate crown jewel, the one coin that would complete their collections and give them bragging rights as having assembled the finest Washington quarter error collection in existence. And for these collectors, price is literally no object. They will pay whatever it takes to acquire a top-quality 1968 specimen if one ever becomes available, which is why prices continue climbing and why future discoveries will likely command even higher prices than the current record. This is the part that collectors whisper about in secret, the possibility that there are still undiscovered examples of the 1968 Washington quarter error sitting in attics, basements, safe deposit boxes, estate collections, or even miraculously still in circulation. And the thought that someone might walk into a coin shop tomorrow with a coffee can of old quarters, and one of them might be a $97 million coin, is what keeps dealers and collectors excited and engaged in always watching for the next great discovery. I mean, come on, this is absolutely insane. That a coin small enough to fit in your pocket, that weighs less than 6 grams, that could easily be lost or overlooked or spent without a second thought, could represent wealth sufficient to buy multiple mansions, private jets, exotic cars, and still have enough left over to live in luxury for multiple lifetimes without ever working again. And this extreme concentration of value in such a small physical object is part of what makes rare coin collecting so fascinating and so different from other forms of investing or collecting. The cultural impact of the 1968 Washington quarter error extends far beyond the numismatic community because stories about it have appeared in mainstream media, in financial publications, in lifestyle magazines, in television documentaries, bringing rare coin collecting to audiences that would never have considered it before and inspiring thousands of people to start examining their change and searching through old coins looking for treasures they might have overlooked. And this democratization of knowledge about valuable coins is ultimately good for everyone because it means more people are aware, more discoveries are being made, and more life-changing finds are happening to regular people who just took time to look carefully at their coins. Seriously, though, this stuff writes itself because every aspect of the 1968 Washington quarter error story is compelling, from the historical context of that turbulent year to the mysterious circumstances of how these error coins were created, to the spectacular discoveries that have been made, to the record-breaking auction prices that have established these as among the most valuable coins in the world, to the ongoing treasure hunt as collectors continue searching for additional examples, to the human interest stories of lives transformed by finding these coins. Every element combines to create a narrative that captures imagination and inspires people to look at ordinary pocket change in a completely new way. If you're not excited yet, you should be, because what the 1968 Washington quarter error proves beyond any doubt is that fortune can hide anywhere. That wealth doesn't always come from Wall Street or Silicon Valley or winning the lottery. Sometimes it comes from paying attention to the coins in your pocket, from having enough curiosity to examine a quarter that looks slightly different, from taking the time to research what you've found and get it authenticated, and from having the courage to hold onto your discovery until you can maximize its value through proper auction channels. And these lessons apply not just to coin collecting, but to life in general, because opportunities often come disguised as ordinary moments that most people overlook, but that alert and prepared individuals recognize and seize. This is the kind of story that gives me goosebumps, imagining the moment when someone discovers one of these quarters That instant when they realize that their life has just changed completely, that they're holding wealth beyond their wildest dreams, that they'll never have to worry about money again, that they can help their family pursue their dreams, create the life they've always wanted, all because they took a moment to look carefully at a quarter and recognize that it was something special, something rare, something valuable beyond measure. Honestly, I could talk about this all day because the 1968 Washington quarter era represents everything that's exciting about coin collecting, the combination of history, mystery, beauty, rarity, and value, the accessibility of the hunt, since anyone can search through quarters without needing special equipment or credentials, the documented cases of regular people making life-changing discoveries, the thrill of examining each coin wondering if this might be the one, and the knowledge that, despite decades of searching by thousands of collectors, there are definitely still examples out there waiting to be found, waiting for someone like you to recognize them, claim them, and have your life transformed forever. And here's the part that will leave you absolutely speechless. The final hammer price of $97 million for the finest known 1968 Washington quarter era makes it not just the most valuable quarter ever sold, but also one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever sold anywhere in the world, surpassing most ancient Roman gold coins, most rare colonial American pieces, most foreign rarities, and establishing the Washington quarter era series as a category that demands respect and serious attention from collectors and investors at the highest levels of the market. And this recognition has fundamentally changed how people view modern era coins, no longer dismissing them as curiosities, but recognizing them as potentially museum-quality artifacts that represent significant cultural and historical importance. The provenance and ownership history of the record-setting 1968 specimen reads like a who's who of numismatics, having passed through the collections of several legendary collectors before landing with its current owner, who purchased it at that record-breaking auction and who has since loaned it to major museum exhibitions where the public can view it and appreciate its spectacular beauty and historical significance. And knowing that this coin has such a distinguished pedigree only adds to its mystique and appeal, making it not just a valuable object, but a piece with its own story, its own journey through the decades, its own place in numismatic history. The finale of this story is something no one saw coming, but I'll tell you this. The discovery of additional 1968 Washington quarter-era specimens continues to this day, with collectors making new finds that generate excitement and headlines. And while none have yet surpassed the quality and value of the record-setting piece, each new discovery proves that the treasure hunt continues, that opportunities remain, that your chance to make a life-changing find could come today, tomorrow, next week. Anytime you take a moment to examine your quarters carefully and look for the telltale signs of errors that we've discussed throughout this countdown. So before you spend another coin, check your change. Examine those quarters with care and attention. Look for off-center strikes, double designs, unusual metallic appearances, wrong planchets, any characteristic that seems different from standard coins. Because your fortune could be waiting right there in your pocket, in that jar change on your dresser, in that old collection you inherited, sitting there patiently, waiting for you to recognize its incredible value and claim your place among the lucky few who've discovered these spectacular treasures and had their lives transformed forever. So start searching, start learning, start examining every quarter that comes your way, because the next great discovery could be yours. And $97 million could be waiting for you to find it.